Welcome to the Contractors Edge, the show where we break down the strategies, tactics, and tools that you need to grow your home service business. Whether you're in a truck or at the office, we're here to give you the edge to win. I'm Mike Stiers.
And I'm Anthony Brown.
So today's episode is packed. We've got an edge of the week that could uncover revenue that's just sitting in your CRM. And then we're going to sit down with one of the most recognized names in the home service industry, Ron Greenbaum. If you've ever thought about building a stronger brand, leading a great team, or even selling to private equity, you're going to want to stick around. So, Anthony, with that, kick off the edge of the week for us, buddy.
Yeah, so this week's edge is all about uncovering hidden revenue without spending a dime on new ads. It's funny, when we were preparing, Mike pointed out to me that this has kind of become a theme, and I love that. I will be the themed like costless marketing advisor, right? So if you can like unearth strategies that can help your revenue, help the business scale, and it not cost more investment, is there anything better? Right? So
No.
this edge of the week is based on a quarterly lead re-engagement campaign. The idea is simple. Every home service business has a database full of leads that cost money at that time to get. People who got a quote but never moved forward, folks who said not right now, or past customers who might be ready for more work. Most companies never go back to them. Sit in the CRM collecting dust, but if you reach out in a smart, organized way, you can wake up those leads and turn them into booked jobs. So here's how you do it. Segment your list, create one group for past customers who could be upsold, and another for old leads who never converted. Your message to each group should be unique and different. 2 is tie it to the season. Run this re-engagement quarterly and align it with seasonal promotions or services. In the spring, maybe it's a sump pump check before heavy rain. In the fall, maybe it's gutter and drainage inspections. Personalize the message. You have the details of that customer, so you're able to get that, those unique touches to that message. Use a real email marketing platform. So like Constant Contact or MailChimp, something you can get a nice structured design. Have a single clear call to action, a limited time offer, a maintenance inspection, or a special seasonal deal. The one thing important to point out, because we've talked about it before, is this is not the same as a rehash program, which is a short-term follow-up within days or weeks of an unsold bid. Re-engagement is a long-term play designed to bring dormant leads back into your pipeline months or even years later. Do it consistently, and you'll see extra revenue coming in without adding a single new lead source.
See, and I love that. It is funny because obviously, I had to point out every time, we jump in to record an episode, you're coming up with these different ways that you can actually help our listeners, apply new strategies or tactics into what they're currently doing that can actually uncover new revenue opportunities. And, I think about it, it is true, being in, this position. I knew we had tons of, potential proposals or even just leads, people that had reached out at different times. And, I know you always laugh, but we created what we called buckets. And, taking these individual buckets and, naming them and then managing them, which is why, if you do like Constant Contact or MailChimp, you can move these folks as they progress to a different bucket. That way they get different and unique messages. But no, really, really cool tip. Awesome edge of the week. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get into the main segment. We're joined by someone who knows what it's like to build from the ground up, scale a brand across multiple states, and make the leap into selling to private equity.
That's right. Ron Greenbaum is not only the founder of The Basement Doctor, but also an author, speaker, and entrepreneur who spent decades shaping the home service industry. We're going to dig into his journey, the lessons learned, and the advice he has for every business owner listening today.
So Ron's journey started back in 1992 when he began working with a small waterproofing company called J&D Home Improvement. Within a few years, he invested in the business, helped rebrand it, put his own likeness on the name. The Basement Doctor became one of the most recognized and trusted brands in the industry. But Ron didn't stop there. In 1995, he co-founded Nash Distribution, which has grown into an international supplier supporting thousands of independent contractors across the United States and beyond. Over the years, Ron has launched and developed 6 companies, employing more than 130 people with locations in 7 states. He's received numerous awards for leadership, business growth, philanthropy, including the prestigious Lifetime Leadership Award and multiple honors from the Better Business Bureau, CEO Magazine, Dave Yoho and Associates, and Smart Business Magazine. He's a published author, a mentor to entrepreneurs, and a passionate advocate for giving back, donating at least 10% of his company's profits to charitable causes every year. Ron's story is one of vision, perseverance, and impact. And today, he's here to share lessons he's learned along the way. Ron, welcome to Contractors Edge.
Well, thanks for having me. My beard is a little whiter these days, but I'm still excited always to talk about business and see if we can help some people.
We appreciate that. And, Anthony and I are excited. Obviously, as we were planning this, you and I have a very long history. You've known Anthony now for several years. And it's just so exciting because all of this is so relevant right now. And everything that you've experienced, for our listeners, this is something that you can provide this history, the change, the evolution, just your mindset, because there's so many things that you have done and experienced and influenced. And so we're going to kind of scratch the surface a little bit here. So we've lined up some questions. So feel free as we go to kind of interject, as you will. But I really want to start with the personal journey, like the origin story. So how did you get into the waterproofing industry?
Well, that's interesting. I had been in the entertainment world and managed some rock and roll bands, produced a couple records, some concerts, things like that. But I got married, and my wife said, I don't really like, we want to have a family, and we want you home at night. And she wasn't crazy about that idea, so I got smart right off the bat. And I answered an ad in the newspaper. And turned out it was a small home improvement company called J&D Home Improvement. And I went to work there, but it wasn't a very big company, so they really couldn't support me at the level I needed to be supported. So then I left, and I became good friends with the owner. But I left and I joined a company called Everdry Waterproofing out of Cleveland, Ohio. And they had an office in Columbus where I lived. And as history says, I was there for a couple of years. I became really the #1 salesman in the whole industry for them. They had about 15 franchises. And I don't know, I just really was able to kind of take what I had learned over the years in sales. I've been in sales my whole life. And I thought good training, some things to do and some things. Anyway, the bottom line was, I went to work for them, but turns out that they didn't have the same philosophy as I had about how to treat customers. So I went back. The whole J&D had grown a little bit, and I went back to work there, and things really worked out.
That's awesome. It is so crazy to think about your journey and just how I know for the podcast you kind of softened it up a little bit, but I remember you telling me that your wife was like, "Well, Ron, it's time to go out and make some real money. You got a family
real
now."
Job. Yeah, she was tired of living off of the doors at bars when the bands were playing, and beyond that, yeah, and it wasn't a good lifestyle.
Yeah.
She had the right instincts there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, without a doubt, it is so cool, obviously, to hear about your background with music and all of these artists. Could jump into another time, but it is pretty cool. So I have this question. I've had so many people ask the same thing, but how did you come up with the name The Basement Doctor?
Well, it is a great question. And I was going from between Columbus, Ohio and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to a trade show.
Steelers.
We had a wholesale company that we had just started, and we had a booth in Pittsburgh. And on the way there, I saw a billboard, and it said The House Doctor. And I thought that was a really cool name. And J&D, the name of the company was J&D Hydrotech, and I kind of inherited that. And I said, I really didn't like it. People didn't know what that meant. when I saw
Hmm.
that, I said, well, I may not be the house doctor, but I'm the basement doctor. And as it stood, there was nobody really using that name on a national basis. And I thought we were going to expand. So, and ultimately we did. So that's how I found the name and was able to get the national trademark on it.
That is really wild. I think for our listeners and, even for individuals that, Anthony and I are working with almost on a daily basis, with our clients, some of them are, owning a business and running it on their own, while others have actually brought in, business partners or co-owners. And
Hmm.
I think it's important for our listeners to understand, like, yourself, you and Tom, did this together and you guys kind of split the house. So, I mean, I'd love for you to share with our listeners, how you guys were able to work successfully and, really grow things that way.
Yeah, that's also a great question of how do you work with a partner? A lot of people don't, but I really thrived in working with a partner. He and I got along really well, and what he was really good at was stuff I didn't like to really do
That
in
helps.
terms of business, and what I was really good at, he didn't really want to be involved with. So really had a great situation there because he handled the administrative part, buying insurance and accounting, worked with accounting, and that was his background. He was in the banking industry, and so it's really good with finance, and especially in the very beginning, we really needed that, and put all those systems in place for accounting and banking, and being able to work with lenders, which was again really important to our growth. Uh,
Hmm.
he, he was really a big believer in profit sharing and buying insurance for sharing a big part of the insurance cost, which at first was kind of tough on the bottom line, but ultimately we had a great amount of people stay with the company for 20, 30 years because
Hmm.
they were very secure. And so, and then I handled the sales and marketing part, which was my background, and also the expansion. I was used to traveling, and I wasn't afraid to take risks and things like that. So that it all worked out really well for 25 years.
So
That's amazing.
to me, it sounds like the takeaway from that is finding a partner that naturally is cohesive, right? Somebody
Yes.
whose strengths you look at as your weaknesses, and when you are able to find that cohesion, there's not as much of the bumping elbows or the conflict that can sometimes happen in partnerships. I know Mike and I have some experience with like the partners or clients we've worked with that are partnerships. I've seen some blow up. Right. You've
Oh,
got
yeah.
the sayings that like never go into business with your friends or your family. And there's all these like kind of warning labels around partnerships. But I think your story is a great one for how to find something that works naturally.
Yeah, and even if you don't go into a partnership, bring people in that are good at what you're not, they're better than what you
Mhm.
are, because ultimately you want to work, it's cliche, but you want to work on the business, not in it, ultimately, if you want any type of growth. So really is, surround yourself with people that are, competent and doing things that maybe you don't really want to spend your time doing.
That
So,
makes perfect sense.
yeah, absolutely. So another really important question in my book is like that milestone, that pivot point where you went from looking at this as a successful endeavor into business versus recognizing that it was something special that you really could scale.
Well, I think that the key was becoming the basement doctor and becoming, a brand. I mean, you can scale a brand, and then what I didn't realize in the beginning necessarily, and Tom and I, neither of us really did. We expanded really quickly right from the onset, and unfortunately, that was a big mistake because we just didn't have a good infrastructure and we didn't have the right employees in place. So it was somewhat of a setback for a couple of years, but again, you live and you learn. So you don't want to grow too fast if you don't, especially if you don't have the right people or the right systems. So even though the brand was important, I think systems were equal, if not even more important, in order to get customer satisfaction. So again, that's why franchises do pretty well if people follow the rules, because they have the systems in place,
Yeah, you create that formula.
marketing
Yeah.
and things like that. So it's franchise is really a shortcut. A lot of people say, well, I don't have to spend that money. I can do it. Well, yeah, that's true. Some people can, but most people don't. So if you can find a system, and both Tom and I were very systems oriented, and and I was fortunate because along the way I found other people, particularly in the sales part, the marketing part. I did myself, and sales management I did myself for even probably too long, but ultimately finding the right people in marketing and sales. And when I found Mike Stiers, it was a definite uh, plus. I mean, it took us into a whole new world of digital marketing and just things that the internet was really new at the time, but he was a real expert on it. And I found out later he was even more of an expert than I realized. And so, we had parallel marketing for a number of years. We had traditional marketing. I had my marketing director, really my assistant for years and years, and she worked with Mike, and he was able to then grow in an area that we hadn't looked at, and that's when things
It
really
was,
started blossoming.
yeah, it was uncharted territory on the digital side of things. It really is fun to kind of look back at those times and see, who were the pioneers, who were the people who were going into the uncharted territory, who were, drafting the maps, building the playbook, and really on the contracting side, especially in the waterproofing industry, Basement Doctor was that.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
yeah, we were at the time part of the Basement Systems Network, which is now pretty much Groundworks, and I mean the big boys. They've all left and gone to Groundworks, but all those guys and they admittedly copied the Basement Doctor marketing, and to this day, everybody does in the whole
yep.
industry, and it's I guess it's a compliment
Yeah.
uh, that they've done that. But so in some ways, we've really grown the entire industry.
Right. So I got another one for you, and then Mike, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Sure.
How do you grow a business in a competitive market without losing profitability?
Well, that's interesting. First of all, you have to focus on what's profitable, and you have to be competitive. And what I realized was that there are certain products that you can include in a job that don't require a lot of labor. I mean, the whole
Hmm.
waterproofing and really the construction industry is labor and materials.
Hmm.
So if you can control labor and materials, that's where you make profit. So you need to understand what your KPIs are, what you need to pay for labor for a job. You need to understand what to pay for materials for a job, and then you have to motivate the people to show them what those numbers are, and give them a reason to hit that. So we became a pay for performance company early on, way before most companies did in the early 90s. And I said, we figured out what we needed as a company in terms of overhead and profitability. And we said, if you guys can come in, below that, we'll
Hmm.
share what's left. And
Hmm.
that worked tremendously for years.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it still does to a degree, but I think the world has changed a little bit, and people aren't willing to what I'm finding when I'm talking to other companies, things that they're struggling even with the pay for performance, because people they want to know, I'm going to get X amount of dollars, and I'm not
Hmm.
really willing to work for it. And
Yeah.
it's
They
a
want the
big,
guaranteed
big,
payday.
big change in the industry,
Yep.
every industry.
Definitely. No, I appreciate that. It's interesting because something that I think that our listeners are really focused on and tuned in on, because we hear this pretty frequently, and you'll hear this in the home service and home improvement industries talked about very often. And that's, how did you maintain your growth and the health of the business during economic downturns or like even slow seasons?
Well, we diversified. Every year I believed in picking up about 20% new products. Uh, and I was sensitive to the fact that, the industry, the waterproofing structural industry, it's feast or famine. You can get a lot of water, but then you have no structural problems, or very few, or you get a lot of structural problems, and then water, isn't there. So we made sure early on, again, this is in the early 90s, we were one of the first companies in the United States to start doing piering and underpinning and structural. We had 2 engineers on staff. And I think that marketing that way helped a lot. We realized what the market was about in this area. And then we started innovating those products. We came up with carbon fiber, which we were the first company in the United States to use it in the way that it's being used today to stop walls from blowing. And it was being used somewhat commercially, but really not in the way to that we started using it. And we took a big risk. But it worked out because it was very expensive material. A lot of people didn't know what it was, but through our
Hmm.
marketing efforts and through our diligence, we were able to bring it into the whole industry, really.
Oh, that's great. I'm curious, and this is more on just my personal side. Obviously, I think the listeners will appreciate this as well. But almost every conversation that we're having these days with clients and others that are in these home service and home improvement industries, they always talk about scaling. They're so focused on scaling, scaling, scaling. Now, a few questions ago, you kind of talked about controlling the growth.
Hmm.
And now I'm curious, what's the biggest lever that you feel maybe most owners overlook when they are trying to scale?
Um, their existing customers is
Mm,
one,
Yes, yes.
gold mine.
and bringing new products. Um, uh, and training their people to install these new products. Just knowing what their market is about. Um, Competition never scared me, because I knew we were better, and I knew that our brand was strong, and I never was about becoming the biggest. I always was about being the best, which is there's
Hmm.
a big difference there. So I saw at a certain point when we started getting a lot of pretty big competitors coming in the marketplace in 2000s, and these guys didn't care about making a profit. Some of them were coming and going. One lasted and did pretty well, but I never really cared about losing. I didn't want to lose jobs to them, but there were other ways through reputation, through marketing, through using our referral base. That we still had at the time, 20, 30,000 customers that they didn't have that we were able to use to help grow. And we offered those customers good service, and some of them used us for 3 or 4 jobs during the course of their home ownership. Uh, and again, we just wanted to make sure that what we sold was a drier, cleaner, healthier, safer, more energy efficient base, that not necessarily basement waterproofing or structural repair. But we kind of everything we did was about, did it fit that category of a drier, cleaner, healthier, safer, more energy efficient home, and not just or even basement. And then we kind of modeled, I looked at a lot of other industries and said, okay, what are they doing? Well, they wanted to grow 10, once a company got to what we did, 25, 30 years old, your growth isn't going to be uh,
Hmm.
unless you really expand your product base, but your customer base isn't going to change that much. And as more people came into the industry, the pie shrunk because, even some of the little, smaller companies, very little overhead. Some people are very price sensitive, so they're willing to
Yeah.
take a risk and not necessarily go with the brand name. So we saw some of that, but really, I didn't care because I just said, okay, this is how much profit we want to make every year, regardless of our volume. And I wanted to, so I capped the volume. And I said, I also can't find enough people to install. We had times where we had 3, 4, even 6 months backlogs in business, and that didn't do anybody any good. I mean, I was shocked most years that people waited that long for us, but they did.
Hmm.
And that tells us how strong the brand was. But I think we learned, as you go, you learn. And what I learned was we didn't want to do uncontrolled volume. We didn't want to give the jobs away. And we could only install a certain amount. And if we wanted to do it the right way, that's the size we needed to be.
I
No,
love
I
that,
really,
Ron.
yeah, no, I really like that too. Like you've mentioned it a few times. I know Mike and I have kind of talked about it, especially, in those conversations with our clients that scaling is like requires a focus on the growth being controlled. Um, because of those kind of pitfalls that you can create for yourself when you have the growth being uncontrolled. A 6 month backlog, most of the time, like because you had such a powerful brand, you were able to, wade through that. Most businesses, especially in this day and age, if they have a 6 month backlog, they're going to have a very high cancellation rate. So it's really important that you're pointing that out. The
Yeah,
next
most
question.
of the time it was nine. We wanted to have 60 days. We thought
Mhm.
that was a nice, comfortable backlog. Most of the time we had 90, but when we got into some droughts or we got into some heavy rainy seasons, we had hundreds and hundreds of calls.
Yeah. But
So,
there's a lot of urgency around these issues,
right.
so.
Well, again, with our systems, we were able to manipulate our people were very, very well trained and been doing it for years. So we knew what we needed to do when those times came, because again, it was always a feast or famine business. I don't care what year it was.
Yeah.
And that's what we learned early on. And I think that again was a reflection in how well the company really did.
So we kind of dipped our toe on this in one of your answers earlier, but it's about how you build a leadership team that can run the business without you, so that you can work more on the business instead of working in the business.
Well, you have to have the hiring criteria for every position, particularly in the leadership part. So we wanted, number one, above all, we always wanted to have honest people. That was the number one criteria. If people were honest and they made mistakes, that's one thing. But if they were dishonest, then we chopped their head off right away. I mean, they didn't last. And fortunately, we didn't have too many of those, but we did, just like any company. But ultimately, we wanted smart people that could absorb the training from no matter what job they did. If they were
Mhm.
a salesperson, they had to absorb the sales platform. If they were in marketing, they had to absorb their position in marketing. If they were in production, a tech one, tech two, foreman, whatever it was, we just didn't want to throw people out there or put people in jobs that they were going to fail at. So,
Mhm.
we developed that hiring criteria. Again, it was smart, honest people that were motivated. We wanted people that were hungry, that wanted to stay with the company. And, we weren't that, we didn't just hire anybody, off the street, because even though at times you really feel like you have to, particularly in the production end, but we just couldn't. So we learned that certain criteria, I mean, when I did the interviews myself, and I did for many years, I was very tough. I didn't, I told them that what the criteria need to be, what I expected out of them. So again, honest people, uh, I looked at their background. I didn't care necessarily if they went to college but if they had some training or things like that. But, you know, we did have a lot of people that were honor students in the administrative part, because I thought if somebody can go through that kind of curriculum in college or high school even or whatever, and they're honor students, then, they're probably pretty good at learning. And that's what we really wanted to do. So I think that was the return. And then we paid them well, for,
Hmm.
comparable to the industry. And again, we gave them the benefits, and we tried to have a good culture of other people to work with, because, people work for three reasons. And when I hired people, and I hope the people that hired that worked for me told the people the same three criteria. Number one, we want to pay, you got to pay your bills, so you got to make a wage that pays your bills. If not, you're not going to last long. You're going to have one eye on the want ads, which now is one eye on the internet. And then secondly, we want you to like what you're doing. You don't have to love it every day, but we want you to like it enough that you show up with the right attitude to do, what's
Hmm.
necessary. And number three, we want you to have a sense of security. And if you do your job well, then you'll have your own sense of security. So those were the three criteria. And I said, if you're not happy, then pull this. I used to make them write it down, and I'd say, pull this checklist out and look at it and say, what's making me unhappy? Is it that I don't feel I'm getting paid enough? And since we're a pay for performance company, that usually was their performance that was preventing them from making what they needed or wanted to make, or else some things outside of our control because they just didn't, control their spending or whatever. And then secondly, if if they got along with people, or we wanted a nice clean environment. We wanted, we had get-togethers. We were involved in the community. We had a lot of things that maybe a lot of home improvement companies didn't do. I think we were the leader in doing a lot of that. And then thirdly, if they felt like they could go somewhere else or whatever, then we didn't hold it against them. It's just we felt we wanted people to stay, and they did for the most part. And we got a lot of good people from a lot of much bigger companies because they just didn't treat people the right way. So again, it's all about the culture of the company. And my partner Tom and I, we wanted certain people working there, and then we wanted to make sure that they could do what we did, that they had the right kind of insurance for their we had the same insurance that our employees had. We got paid the same amount towards our insurance as the employees did. We had the same 401k plan, same vacations, everything was pretty much the same for everybody. And, we had a lot of holiday pay, a lot of vacation because it was hard work and what
Hmm.
we did. So I think those are some key things in running a business. It can't just be you making all this money and
Hmm.
whatever, because the money that you make in business is the caboose at the head of the train. I mean, at the back of the train. It's for doing what it is that you do and do it the right way, and then you'll have a surplus, hopefully. Um, and if you don't, then you better have had a surplus in the past that people say, how do you get through reset, whatever? Well, same way you do personally. You've got to make sure, and we had tremendous amounts of equity in the company, great lines of credit. We paid our bills on time, so we were fortunate. If things got tough, we could call a supplier and say, we'll be another 2 weeks or whatever, and we never got any slack for it.
Yeah, I think that was a big piece of it too. I mean, obviously working for, the basement doctor for several years myself, when I joined the company, I didn't really know what to expect. And, Ron, we always laugh about it. I had zero experience in, home services and home improvement. And I didn't feel like it wasn't. Now, I was like, oh, I'm going to be working for a construction company. I expected something that was very different. You provided, very family oriented, strong culture. And I think that was one of the pieces that made people want to work there, is that they loved it because your morals and values bled through to everything. And I think that's important for our listeners to understand is, and you had taught me as well, if you can find things that people are passionate about, and then you kind of like roll those into what your business is doing and what you stand behind, it makes so much more sense. And it resonates then with the homeowners too, because now you've got these great people that are out and they just want to do a great job for everybody, and they're friendly and they're easy to work with. And that, I think you guys did an exceptional job, because it was the opposite of what I expected. But knowing that you seem to have like this super secret way of doing things, and so I kind of want to expose this so that our listeners can understand too. You were able to spot leaders or those that you felt had leadership potential before they even saw it in themselves. And so I kind of want you to expand on that. Like, what did you see? What were you looking for? How did you know?
You know, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I think I just got fortunate in that once somebody showed me their work ethic, and I thought, well, they can be trained up. I always looked at a ladder for success for people, and I tell them that. I'd say, you can climb this ladder, but you got to do it yourself. So, what is it that you want to do? That's what I would always ask. Isn't what I want you to do, because what I want you to do doesn't really make a difference. What you want to do, and so there's opportunity, and you need to show me that you can take advantage. There's nothing wrong with taking advantage. So I took advantage of people's skills, and I looked at what their skills are and what they would be. But we were all about training. We had a sales meeting once or twice every week, and I gave those meetings for 20 plus years. And despite the fact that I had sales managers and other people, and it took me a while to give up on that part, because I think our best salespeople learn from those meetings. And
Oh yeah.
I handled, the marketing to a certain point, as you know, Mike.
Mhm.
I let you, slowly but surely over the
You
years,
let me make some mistakes, Ron.
yeah, and take some things over. Uh, that's, but I wanted you learn from your successes. And
Mhm.
people say, well, you learn from your mistakes. Well, hopefully you learn not to do it again, but we really want to learn from I always said you learn from your successes and keep duplicating it.
Mhm.
Duplicate success, not, and I look at what other industry, I thought it was my job as the CEO to be the chief education officer. So I spent a lot of time really studying other industries and how they became successful in terms of marketing and sales and just, production. Our pay
Mhm.
for performance came from a company called Worthington Steel here, which is a multi-billion-dollar company in Columbus. But we had the same performance as pay for. And my banker said, he looked at it and he said, you're doing exactly what Worthington Steel's doing. And I didn't realize it at the time, but then he said, and I met the CEO, and he gave me a few more tips on doing a few things. So, I was fortunate in becoming a brand and meeting a lot of people. And,
Yeah.
and I did get some, recognition and some awards, some pretty prestigious awards especially
Mhm.
for a little company like ours. And we became a much bigger company. And uh, I think at one point, there's media said you probably have the strongest brand in the industry and maybe in the city. So
Yeah.
we
That actually rolls into my question perfectly, Ron. So I want to know, how did you approach branding so that it became so sticky, right? That it became so memorable, that it stuck around.
Well, it was a process. Again, I got involved with people that knew how to grow brands. A
Mhm.
woman named Tanya Eberhard, who
Yep.
ended up, after we worked together, she published a couple books, Brand Face for the Home Improvement Industry, which I co-wrote with her, and Brand Face for the Real Estate Industry, which she has become very famous
Yep.
real estate world for writing that book. But when you become the face of the brand, you just have to be everywhere, and once you do, it kind of snowballs. So as an example, if I'd go out to lunch, for instance, the wait person, and we did so much advertising that most people knew who I was. So they'd say, "Oh, you're the basement top." Yeah. Well, a few minutes later, I'd see other wait people coming over towards the table, and then all of a sudden I'd see a cook, or somebody else, and the manager, all these people would kind of gravitate towards the
Yeah.
table. So in essence, what happened was all those people would go home, the wait people, the cooks,
Mhm.
everybody, and they'd all say, "Oh, guess who was in the restaurant today? The basement doctor." Well, that didn't cost me anything except going a
Mhm.
meal. And I literally had people come and try to sit and did sit next to me at lunch and take a picture or this or that. I mean, it got to where, again, but it was, I decided early on, our budget was much larger than it probably should have been, but we grew quicker because of that. And again, I knew ultimately we would catch up. So, and then it went the other direction where we could just continually lower the amount of money, but it seemed like we were everywhere. So, I
Mhm.
went to, you mentioned Yoho. I went to a
Yep.
couple of his home improvement, and I realized we were kind of ahead of the game of what most of the people in the country were doing. And then they published what you were paying per lead, and we were very good at numbers. And I think that was the other thing is I developed spreadsheets along with my daughter, who
Yep.
has a business degree, master's degree from Ohio State, Fisher School of Business, and she helped me develop a lot of numbers. And if you look at marketing the right way, now it's really much easier. But even
To
back
measure.
then,
Oh, so much
you could
easier.
crunch the
Yeah.
numbers, and we did on a regular basis. And we either the number was green or the number was red and or yellow. Sometimes we'd say, okay, it's yellow, red, and it's interesting. I went to a physical a couple of weeks ago at my doctor, and I got back 6 pages of results, and that's how they graded every single part of your blood. I had these 10 vials of blood taken every year. I have a massive physical, and it was amazing because I had all greens and two yellows. I used to have some reds and this and that, my blood pressure, but I've been on a real kick. And that helps me because I can look back and I have last year's versus this year's, and I see the improvement, and I've improved in every category. So in the yellows, the doctor said those aren't to be anything to be concerned with. But that to me is what we did. We did the same thing. We said at one point we had 100 different lead sources. 100. You might say that's
It's
no, we
crazy.
didn't, but we did.
A
And
lot.
uh,
Yeah.
just all kinds of ways people found us, and we tried. And some of these lead sources we hadn't done for years, but people still found them or remembered them, and it became towards the end of my career, it was really everybody was the internet, the internet, the internet,
Yep.
but that really wasn't actually 100% accurate because a lot of these other lead sources were still relevant, and we knew
Mhm.
Mhm.
that. And then we got rid of some Angie's List particularly. We were horrible at
Yeah.
Angie's List for whatever the reason. I analyzed it. I said the reason is that Angie List makes people think they can go with the cheapest price because they
That's
say,
right.
okay, Angie checked out all these companies. They all have A's from Angie's List. So why do I care? I'm just going to use the cheapest company. So we
Mhm.
realized that. And I said, you know what? We don't need that lead source. And Mike really, and I think we went back a couple times and Mike
We did.
testify that it never really worked. I don't know if it does anymore or not, but
No,
you know,
not for established brands. That's the biggest thing. You were so right, and it's so interesting because you came up with these, we would be in meetings, and I remember we were studying ROI reports and we're looking at all these lead sources, and Ed, your sales manager at the time, Ed's like, well, we're just not doing so good at Angie's. And I remember you were like, well, that's because they expect the lowest price. We're not that. We are the best value, and we're going to provide the best solution, and that's what we're driven to be, not a cheap price. And Ron, I'll tell you, I mean, it still rings true, and we've tested it, and our clients still try to test Angie's too. From time to time, if it's a small ticket item, the bigger brands can still be competitive. But outside of that, it's really the chuck in a truck world. It's the
Mhm.
guys that they don't have a lot of overhead and they can, kind of be price conscious there and win that battle. But I want to take us in because you had kind of brought us right up to this point, and I think it's important for our listeners too. What would you say, like if you could pick one marketing investment that you had made over the years, and it could be a platform, it could be, an instance, what had the biggest impact?
Television.
Yeah.
Back in the day when there weren't a lot of people on it. Now you get on and there's 20 waterproofing. I was pretty much it for many years. And we had some good commercials. And I even did 30-minute infomercials at one point on cable. And so TV, the number one thing that I think happened for our company was the basement doctor and me becoming the basement doctor and being able to figure out how to do it the right way. And initially, we got some really good testimonials from one school teacher in particular that everybody thought was an actress. She was very good at doing the commercial, and we ran that commercial for probably 5 years and religiously, and it was great. We may have run it for 10 years. I mean, you don't have to change things if it's working. So that worked. And then again, we developed the trust wrap. We started every commercial a certain way. We ended it a certain way. And what was in the middle depended on, sometimes we moved to products. We weren't really into product. We were into service initially. Then we started coming up with products and we started showcasing employee, things. We just evolved over the years. But
That's
I think
great.
the number one thing that helped grow the company, if it wasn't people, I mean, certain people helped grow it, but the thing that really worked was becoming the basement drop.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different now. And I actually I love that kind of testimonial in a sense for visual media. Like my background before joining the agency was coming from TV. And so I'd have to try to help people understand or perceive the power of visual media to build trust. The fact that you could go there and say, hi, my name is Ron Greenbaum and I'm the basement doctor. These are my principles. These are my values. This is why you should do business with me. Share that testimonial from, you said natural actress that was actually a teacher. Visual media gives you more of that tie to people because you see it, you hear it, and it's in your home. That's like a part that people often miss. It's that they're already sitting at the kitchen table and, playing the TV in the background, or the family's gathered around and they all know what the problems are with the home. And now you're showing them what those problems are and proving that you're trustable. So I've always.
Yeah, I mean, you have to get the emotional connection. There's people that do their own commercials or hire people to do commercials and they just don't have that. It's just a spokesperson. It's not, the guy that's out there, the blue collar guy wearing that, I developed some things by luck. I wore a ball cap in a couple of commercials and people loved that. And I did a focus group with ABC television and they said what people really liked was you and your ball cap and they trusted you. And, so we kept going down that road. And eventually all I did, my set was me standing outside my pickup truck, which I drove, and just saying, hey, call me. If you got a nasty basement or crawl space for a dryer cleaner, healthier, more energy efficient home, call me now and get back in the truck. And that was it. And that's all we needed to do because we did do that. We were able to do all that. So, again, part of it is just luck, I guess, I had people early on tell me, I had an advertising agency that we were with say, oh, you don't want to do your own commercials because then people will bug you or this or that. But I didn't care about that. And then I did my own, and then she said, oh, you're actually pretty good at it. So maybe we'll keep going. Then started taking credit for coming up with that idea, but it really wasn't. It was general manager at a TV station that said, you need to be doing your own commercial. And I got interviewed a lot on about the weather on the news, became the go-to expert anytime we had heavy rains. you know, I was in the community. I believed in giving back to the community. So I did a lot of that. And because I thought it was, we needed to be part of the community. So all that
Hmm.
lent itself to the success.
Oh,
I
that's
feel
great.
that's leverage that like home or business owners have that they don't utilize as much as they should. And you've kind of shown the power that that can have when you're thinking about home services, being the owner and having that conversation or making that promise or saying what your values are. It sticks more, it means more. So
I think it's wonderful, Ron. And I don't want our listeners to miss the opportunity. You briefly mentioned, working with Tanya on the book, brand face. I just want the listeners to know when we're out there and we're going to the trade shows and, we're exhibiting, we're typically bringing about a dozen of these books with us. I highly recommend it. Literally, no joke. It is Ron's transparent playbook into building this brand and the way that you kind of work it not only into your marketing and advertising strategies, but even into your culture. And it's available on Amazon. If you search brand face. But there was also a really fun project that we got to work on together. And you named it From the Ground Up. And initially it was the 25 things, I believe. And I remember, after we had worked together for a few years, we wanted to go back and revisit it so that we could get the 30 things, because I heard you say we had these Ron-isms and they're like literally like the commandments, because it is, the more I got to know you, as long as I was familiar with those, I would almost understand what the method was or the reasoning behind things. So, I want to encourage people. We're going to put it in the show notes. We'll have links for both of those books. You can actually get a digital copy of the 30 things, I believe. But Ron, maybe you'd like to talk about those just for briefly, and then we'll go back into our questions.
Well, after I read Brand Face through after it was, written and published, I got very tired because it was a lot of work.
It was.
Not necessarily in writing the book, but in doing all those things, because it was really 20 years, probably 20 years of what we did to grow the brand. And we did a lot. And it talks about everything from, cause marketing, which is a big buzzword. We didn't call it cause marketing. We just talked about paying forward. And
Yep.
it talked about how you manage people, how you give people chances, what you do, what kind of people you want to attract. And a lot of it came really from a speech I gave to Columbus State University, the
Mhm.
largest community college in the country, and they asked me to speak to their business program, and I did. And I didn't like what I was going to say, and then my wife said, "What you really need to do is tell them who you are and what you're about, because these are mostly people that some of them go to school part time or they're working, and and so I told them my story, and that's really what my story is about, and then showed people really how to go about doing it. And it's really a textbook about how to grow a brand. And you don't necessarily have to be a brand face, but, in my case, I was, but I would, I almost want to come up with a secondary book called Celebubrand, because we did it to the extent where people would call me a celebrity. And, there's goods and bad about that, but I think it's important that you are consistent in whatever you do in the marketing and how you treat people. And I think that this book, the 30 things I believe in, and that's what a CEO or a president of the company, particularly a CEO, an owner, that your company is a reflection of who you are.
hmm
You make, no matter how big you get, while you're still the owner, it's who you are, and whatever it is. And I learned that early on from a woman in Ohio who said to me, um, an older woman called one day, and our Dayton office at the time, I was in Columbus, about 40 miles away from where she lived, 50 miles away. And she said, "You guys did a horrible job." And she started talking, she said, "When you were out here," and I said, well, I wasn't out here. She said, yes, you were. I said, no, ma'am, I never was out to your house. She said, don't you own the company? I said, yeah. She said, well, then you were out here because everybody that works for you is you.
Oof.
That really resonated. And I
Yeah.
said, you know what? She is 100% right. I got in my car, I went out there, found out they had done a lousy job on regrading. It was a big excavating job. They had done nothing like what our rules were for that. And I learned her name was Mrs. Roth. Now I was trying to remember, her name was Mrs. Rothrock. And she lived on a main street called Dixie Highway in Dayton, Ohio. A lot of traffic. She said, I'm about to put a sign out, not to use the basement doctor, a big sign that I'm
Oof.
going to put in my front yard. I did not want that. I don't want it for anybody, but especially on Dixie Highway. But anyway, I went out there and I talked to that woman many times after, and I thanked her. And I sent her a gift, a gift card to go to dinner because I said, you know what, you've really helped me because I didn't really take it as seriously as I should have. And after that, I did.
Yeah, and it's wild, Ron, because it's like you have always and you've really helped me. So I want to, share that as, one of my mentors. You help me to understand that, feedback is, you have to be willing to accept it or at least
Mhm.
listen to it. And sometimes there's something there. Sometimes people are saying things or, whatever out of emotion, but other times there's some validity to it and there's something that can be taken away. And you always taught us that and you looked for it. And your conflict resolution, business owners, conflict resolution. Obviously, this is something that's major. It happens all the time. You nor your employees can be perfect all of the time. So it's really how you react to that. Ron had all of us prepared for worst case scenarios to where we could go in and, ask the right questions and be willing to listen. And we already knew kind of what our resolution was going to be, but Ron was literally like steps ahead of everybody. It was just wild.
Well,
So
it's
I want to switch up
experience.
gears, Ron.
It's experience and it's learning.
Yeah.
And again, I always had the philosophy of looking in the mirror when no matter what, because there's a reason why somebody feels a certain way. It doesn't mean it's right, but there's a reason. So,
Mhm.
you got to look in the mirror and you have to weigh, business is, I get my nurturing at home from family and friends. I don't get it necessarily at the business. So, you have to make business decisions versus personal decisions. Not always easy. And sometimes the customer's not always right. My ex-partner used to say this all the time. Customer's not always, but they're always the customer. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
you got to weigh things according to, what do you need to do when you're in a service industry? You, it's a customer, and we used to have salespeople say, "Oh, that customer's this problem or production." Well, guess what? That salesperson sold that person the job. If they were that bad, why'd they sell them the job? And they made a commission or, a bonus or whatever. So I never looked at it other than that's what we do.
No, that's great. Yeah, I want to switch up gears a little bit, as we're coming to our close and a segment in our time with you today. And I want to talk about, really the exit, this transition and the legacy. Often people are like, okay, well, how do you prepare your business for sale and how do you do all of these different things? And, you know, those are things obviously we're going to talk with, another industry affiliate that you all also worked with. But what I want to ask you, because this is important for business owners, how did you mentally prepare to step away from the business that you built?
Well, it's never easy. Unless there's there's a couple of reasons why people sell. One is they just get old and say, you know what, I
Yeah.
can't do it anymore. But a lot of times it's they get tired of it and they just, or they're not doing well and they think, well, if I sell it, I'm getting rid of a headache. I had a really good friend that's an attorney that really like international attorney that retired early on. And I said, why did you, his name's Graham. And I said, Graham, why did you retire? He said, I had enough and I have enough. So I always thought about that. And after he said that to me. And it got to the point where I said, you know what? I do have enough. I thought the business was worth, substantially because we were doing well. And a lot of people over the years had wanted to buy the business, and I said no. And finally, I got to the point, my daughter was working at the time, and I said, "Do you want to stay in the business?" And she said, "Not really." She said, "It's not. I'm not really. I will if you want, if I need to, but I'd rather do something else." And she had a degree in marketing and business, and we did have an advertising agency. So, and that's where I thought, ultimately she'd end up anyway. So, anyway, I said, okay. And she met a woman who my daughter did, spoke to a women's group, and this woman was like, had done a lot of merger and acquisition and sold billion-dollar companies or whatever. And she's, I met with her and she said, well, if you're going to do it, let's do it right. And before that, I had actually met and taken a couple seminars on how to sell your business. And one was in Maryland and one was in New York. And I learned, they had textbooks and things. So it's how I learned. So I learned what I needed to do. And of course, these seminars were given by companies that wanted to charge you, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But what they did show me was how to get the business ready to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we did. We said, okay, if we are going to sell, how do I get it ready? And we looked at it and it was pretty ready. It was about 80% there, but we met with, we hired a company called Focus CFO, and they came in and looked at how we were doing things on the accounting, and then I said, well, what would the holdup be in selling? They said, well, you've got to have, quality of earnings report. So that takes 6 months to do, and that's what the company that's going to buy you is going to do. They're going to go through every square inch of your business. And I said, well, why don't we do our own? And they said, well, you could, but the other company, whoever bought you would have to accept it. So I said, well, let's go with one that people know. And I didn't, the cost was very high. And so I hired Focus CFO to work with this other company, spent a lot of money getting the company ready to sell. My daughter pretty much full time started working on that along with our CFO. And it was tough, but it took us and then we put together our own, sales program. I hired a investment banker who took a percentage, but also helped us get ready. So we were really prepared. And when we started out, we had 55 letters of interest once we started, and then we whittled that down to 5, and then we accepted the 1 out of 5. And at the time, I got probably 30% more than anybody else in our industry had gotten in terms of selling our company in the industry in terms of what I got for the company. And I wouldn't have sold for less than that, honestly.
Yeah.
I had a number, and I never thought honestly didn't think I was going to get it. And it came in above what I thought, what I was willing to accept, which was phenomenal. So, but I knew, again, I was ready. I thought the company was ready. We had a lot of equity built up. We didn't, we weren't trying to fool people. That we had money in the bank. We had great employees and great platforms. So it wasn't hard.
That's awesome. I'm really curious too. One of Anthony's clients, and initially I had met this individual at one of the NASH trainings. I was presenting for marketing. We had a little booth set up for the agency. Met him at the time. It was him, and I think he had like 2 other people doing about $750,000 a year, on up to where this year he actually did exit the business. At eight figures, is what they got to on their revenue mark. But the question I have for you, he stayed around on the exit as part of the plan, right? And now I'm pretty sure he's having some regrets. So, I kind of want to get your take on it as far as stayed, but just for a very short period of time, just for that
No, I
initial.
didn't stay at all.
Didn't stay at all. I thought you had
My
kind of stayed
daughter
around
stayed.
for a little
My
Yeah,
while.
daughter
Betsy.
did. No, I didn't stay. I got paid and that was my last day.
Hey, good for you. Yeah, would you have considered staying around?
No, because I had many friends who sold businesses and they told me uh, probably that they didn't they did not feel good about the transit. If you're going to stay, you had to stay for a good period of time
Yeah.
and keep running the business. I wasn't running the business at the end anyway. My daughter was.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
she stayed for not long enough because they told her they didn't need her after 3 months, I think, and
Yeah.
supposed to be there for 6 months or a year. And they've it was a disastrous decision on their part.
Yep. Yeah, it's wild. When I look back on it, I see how drastically they change things. And that's what
Hmm.
I do want our listeners just to understand that portion of it is that, we've experienced it a few times in the transitions. I know that you saw firsthand how things happen. you know, Congratulations when you do sell your business to
Hmm.
private equity. It's something that you've worked very hard for, and it is, I mean, it's an exciting time. At the same time, understand probably not a bad idea to exit the business at that time, like Ron did, because if you stick around, you're literally going to watch them unravel everything that you put together.
Yeah,
I've seen,
they have a different private equity
yep.
has a different philosophy. They tell you they don't, but they do.
Hmm.
And it's, you know, it's not the way I wanted to do things, but you know what? It works for some people. My suggestion is when you leave, get the money.
Yeah.
Um, you could roll some. I rolled some money back into the future, but I got enough initially that if I never got another penny, it would have been okay. Um, I knew what I wanted when I left, and I did. That's the thing. I paid probably maybe 250 to $300,000 to get my company ready, which a lot of
Hmm.
people would like, that's crazy, but it wasn't crazy. It was the best thing I ever did because it
You
got,
ended up getting an offer above your target.
yeah, I
Yeah.
got a maximum amount for the company. And, I'm not sorry to this day. It
Yep.
took me maybe 6 months to a year to really uh, realize that I was no longer, working at that level. But
Hmm.
you know what? I enjoy I'm in the legacy part of my life. I still am very active more active now with charity than my wife and I are more active than we've ever been. And that's a really good feeling to be able to sell your company and then still be able to do that and do it at a much higher level than we ever did before.
That's great.
Uh, I, I've always loved my ability to kind of attend because of those associations you have with the different charitable organizations, and it has been a fun thing that we've been able to take part in at the agency
Hmm.
because of your guys' giving. So I just wanted to thank you for that. Um,
Thank you,
I
Ron.
get the honor of the last question, which is awesome. This one's, a little bit more on the fun side, but if you have something super serious, please do give it to us. But I wanted to know what your favorite quote or principle you live by is. Mike thinks he knows what you're going to say, so you can stump him.
Um, my favorite one is "This too shall pass."
Mm.
Ooh.
All right, you got me.
Why? What did you think it was?
It's funny, new information, new decision. You were always so prepared for change. And, I know a lot of our listeners uh, are a little maybe resistant to change at times, but man, what a pioneer. I know the first time that you and I sat down and had that discussion, literally you were interviewing me after I had met your team, at the job fair. It was interesting because you threw a few Ron-isms at me, and that's why I thought, now this too shall pass. That is excellent, and that is one that obviously I see you live by.
I
I
think
thought,
more now than I think more now because uh, I'm involved more with personal things than the business. I think from a business standpoint, I think you're right, Mike. That's a really good one. But even in business, I realized you couldn't get so hung up that you because things do change in business, and you know, I didn't. I think being steady was important because if I wasn't steady, everybody else wouldn't. But new information, new decision is a great one. No question about it.
yeah. All right, Ron. Well, I really want to thank you for, taking the time today. I'm hoping that our listeners, have really gotten something out of this interview. Do you have any, final things that you want to leave our listeners with today?
Well, I've been spending some time consulting people on how to sell their business. Right now, I'm working with a gentleman that has sold for a tremendous. He's in the car logistics industry, and he's become a very good friend. And I'm working with him now on what he needs to do. He's getting a little cold feet. Now, his attorney and I are both trying to tell him, look, you made your decision. He's gotten a tremendous offer, and he's got to realize that that's what happens. I mean, you start thinking, and I did even almost towards the last week of, you know, I can get out of this still, but ultimately I said, you know what, I'm going to live up to the commitment I, made to sell. And so, if people, again, I mean, I do charge for consulting work, but
Mhm.
I'm available. I don't do it very much. And but if somebody really is serious about selling their business and has gotten some offers and things, I think I can. I'm pretty good at looking at what they have and maximizing, what they're going to get if they do things the right way.
Well,
You
make sure you
definitely have
shout out where
experience.
they can reach you, Ron. I know you
Yeah.
still have the website up, right?
Yeah, rongreenbaum.com.
Awesome.
And there's all my information there. And I have people that help me and with all that. So it's not just me; it's other people that are in the industry of helping people. But again, um, thanks for having me. I mean, again, I'm mostly on the golf course these days, or at a charity event. I have one coming up Monday, or with my grandchildren and enjoying the fruits of all the hard work. And that's what you're in business to do.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
thank you
Well, Ron,
again.
yeah,
Sure.
thanks for sharing your
You
words
guys
of
are doing a
wisdom.
great job and keep it up.
Thank you. It means a
Fantastic.
lot coming from you, Ron.
Okay.
Thank you, Ron.
All right.
All right. Obviously, Ron's a wealth of knowledge. It's always fantastic to have someone like him around that's able to share his experiences and these tips with our listeners. So many can be applied, and you can just learn from these. So, Anthony, with that, if you can take us into the pro tip of the week, please.
All right, I have to follow up the great Ron. So, pro tip of the week this week is tying your sales, marketing, and operations data together. Now, don't wait until you're ready. Don't wait until you're ready to sell the business. So, when you can instantly show a buyer how every marketing dollar turned into booked revenue, you're not just selling a company; you're selling a predictable, profitable machine. So, take that time to knit up the data, what you have coming in now, because it will save you time and it will put you in a more favorable position. Are prepared to sell.
Yeah, and that's such a actionable tip. I mean, it's funny because as we talk in almost every episode, we're talking about tracking KPIs and different systems that you can implement and ways that you can actually do all of these different things. I'll tell you in the future episodes, we're going to have individuals on here, that help businesses prepare to, sell essentially. Owners that are either going to sell to, internal employees or, independently. You
Mm-hmm.
have to have everything in order. The first thing that they do is ask to see your books. So, Anthony, great tip. Uh, you know, We obviously want to thank Ron, once again for his time, sharing his experience and insights with us today. For our listeners, your action items this week are simple. Audit your CRM for old leads, set up your first quarterly re-engagement campaign. Everything that Anthony provided, totally actionable. Start documenting your processes, track your KPIs if you aren't already. If you got value from this, just do us a favor, like, rate, follow, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening, so we can continue to bring you the tips, tools, tactics that give you the edge in growing your business. So with that, Anthony, we're out.
We're out.